Should women be forced to compete against men in athletic competition? Can states require separate sports categories based on biological sex? How should we think about protecting women and girls? Here's the point. State of West Virginia versus PBJ, a landmark case that will determine whether states can protect women's sports from biological males, is being heard today at the Supreme Court in the opening oral arguments. The case centers on West Virginia's Save Women's Sports bill, which requires student athletes to compete in sports matching their biological sex. A biological male student challenged the law, seeking to compete on girls' track teams. Lower courts blocked the law, but the Supreme Court will now decide whether states have constitutional authority to maintain sex-separated sports. The stakes are enormous. This case affects athletic programs across all 50 states, impacting millions of female athletes from elementary school age all the way up to college. It will determine whether biological reality or gender ideology shapes American sports policy. Make no mistake, this isn't just about athletics. It's about whether our nation will recognize fundamental biological truths or surrender to ideology that denies reality itself. So how should we think about this? And here's the point. First, we must recognize what has been true since creation. There are only two biological sexes. Scripture is clear. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. This isn't religious preference. It's biological fact written into every cell of our bodies. Every human being is either male or female, determined at conception by chromosomes. No amount of hormone therapy, surgical intervention, or ideological assertion can change this fundamental reality. Gender is not a social construct. Male and female represent distinct biological categories with real, measurable differences. Differences that matter tremendously in athletic competition. As Christians, we cannot compromise on this truth. When we deny the reality of male and female, we're rejecting God's creative design. Second, transgender ideology in sports causes real harm to women and children. Natural, anatomical differences between males and females create insurmountable advantages in athletic competition. Males have larger hearts and lungs, greater muscle mass, denser bones, and higher testosterone. These are advantages that begin at puberty and persist throughout life. Sports medicine research shows that even after testosterone suppression, biological males retain 80 to 90% of their physical advantages over females. We've seen this at the Olympic level. At the 2024 Paris Games, Italian boxer Angela Carini abandoned her match against biological male Iman Khalif after 46 seconds, saying she'd never been hit so hard. She left in tears, withdrawing for her own safety. Both Khalif and Taiwan's Lin Yu-ting, biological males who failed gender eligibility tests, competed in women's boxing and won gold medals. This isn't just about lost medals. When biological males compete against females in contact sports, women get injured. Female athletes who've trained their entire lives are displaced by biological males with inherent advantages. Girls are forced to change in locker rooms with biological males, violating their privacy and safety. When we tell young girls their safety matters less than someone else's feelings, we teach them their dignity is negotiable. That's not compassion, that's cruelty. Third, protecting women's sports is not partisan. It's an issue where most Americans agree. Polling consistently shows overwhelming support for keeping women's sports for biological females. A 2024 Gallup poll found 69% of Americans oppose allowing transgender athletes to compete based on gender identity rather than biological sex. That includes majorities of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. This isn't manufactured culture war. This is common sense shared across the political spectrum. Even many who supported other transgender policies draw the line at women's sports. They recognize fairness in athletics requires sex-separated categories. They understand women fought for decades to secure equal opportunities through Title IX, and those opportunities are now threatened. President Trump understood this. His executive order 14201, keeping men out of women's sports, directed federal agencies to protect female athletics. His leadership created pressure that forced international bodies like the International Olympic Committee to finally act. This Supreme Court case represents a critical moment in our nation. If the court upholds West Virginia's law, it affirms states can protect women's sports based on biological reality. If it strikes down the law, it forces every state to allow biological males into women's athletics, regardless of what citizens want or what science says. So what should we do? Christians must speak the truth with courage. We cannot be silent while women and girls are harmed. Support organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom fighting these battles in court. Pray for the justices hearing this case that they would have wisdom to rule justly. Teach the next generation that truth matters, that reality is not negotiable, that God's design for male and female is good, and that protecting women isn't hatred, but love. Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The truth is, God created us male and female. The truth is, women deserve fair competition and safe spaces. The truth is, love requires us to speak clearly, even when culture demands silence. This is our moment. God has placed us here for such a time as this. Pray for this case, support those fighting for women's sports, and speak the truth without apology, without fear, and without compromise. Women's sports are worth defending, and by God's grace, we will defend them.